So welcome to DiSH Montana. Again, my name's Kate Lefkin. I'm with an organization called Montana Pediatrics. We work to increase access to pediatric care and health equity for kids across the state of Montana. About a year-ish ago, we started an effort supporting families of kiddos with type 1 diabetes and really found a lot of need from those families to feel a little bit more supported in school. And we learned about their diagnosis and their care experience. And out of that was born a relationship with Dr. Allie Pollock and her diabetes and school health program. So we're, again, so excited. Month 5, I think, of the school year so far, which is pretty cool. And Allie, go ahead and take it away and tell us a little bit about what's going to happen here in the next half hour.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. And some of you have been to these sessions before, but in case you're new, Diabetes in School Health, or DiSH, is a monthly school diabetes health teleconferencing program designed by school nurses and diabetes experts to bring us together and share and learn about diabetes. It's established in Wisconsin and in Washington and now in Montana, and hopefully growing further. And we'll tell you a little bit more, I think, on the next slide. It's inspired by this program called Project ECHO, which many of you have heard of, which is a telementoring and community of learning based educational program. And so the whole idea is that a lot of care happens in specialty centers a few times a year, but as school nurses and school personnel, you're caring for students day to day, and you know well more about their day-to-day lives. And so this is a way to sort of empower and collaborate with you. So the expert hubs are the diabetes experts, and then the spokes are traditionally in ECHOs, the PCPs in the community, but in this case, it's the school nurses. So each session usually has a didactic portion where there's, educational, more traditional information given. And then the second portion is a lot of discussion, sharing experiences, hopefully very comfortable and safe place to both ask questions, but also share practical strategies that have worked for you. And so just to emphasize, it shouldn't feel like just a webinar where you just listen to this information and log off and get your credit. We hope to all learn from each other, be engaged, and share experiences. Again, this goes through sort of the structure of the session. So we'll start with our featured presentation and then open it up for discussion and idea sharing or scenario sharing. And I will encourage people to share things even if they don't think it's very unique or special or different from what other school nurses are having. I think sometimes everyone assumes everyone else understands it, and often it's nice to share. So pipe up if you can. And then, of course, the survey we just talked about in the follow-up email, which will summarize both the topic and also any key points from the discussion.
All right. Before I introduce our featured speaker today, I just wanted to also mention to this group, Montana Pediatrics, within the next couple of weeks, we'll see an official job posting, but we are hiring a part-time diabetes program manager, which will help me, the very non-diabetes proficient individual, put together DiSH sessions and all of the other facets of the Montana Pediatrics diabetes program. And then for some of you who may not know, Montana Peds, in partnership with the University of Montana, received a grant from HRSA for a 5-year rural complex care coordination program. We're just one of 5 demonstration sites chosen nationally to work on all of the issues surrounding care coordination for children with medical complexity living particularly in rural states. So we are hiring a full-time RN for that. So just sharing, Montana Peds is growing. And with that, in addition to our DiSH work, we're hoping to expand some content similar to DiSH around working with kiddos with medical complexity as well. So keep an eye out for that to be added to our suite of programming for the next school year. All right, so today's featured presentation, Brooke Foth is a registered dietitian and diabetes educator who joined the Logan Health team in 2021. However, she's a little different. She's based out of Logan Health, located down in Missoula. After being diagnosed with type 1 at the age of 17, Brooke decided to pursue a degree in nutrition in hopes of someday helping kids with type 1 diabetes. She now enjoys teaching kids about healthy nutrition and insulin management strategies, including CGM and insulin pump therapy. Brooke is the lead dietitian for the Montana Youth Diabetes Camp and loves to be involved in the diabetes community. She enjoys teaching cooking classes and getting kids with type 1 together in Missoula. When she's not in the clinic, she enjoys making jewelry, backpacking, skiing, and spending time with the family. So thanks, Brooke, for being here. We're excited to have you, and take it away. I'll advance your slides for you.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate you. Well, and thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate all of you and all the work you guys are doing with the kids. So I'm really glad you all are here as well. So today's presentation objectives I'm hoping to go through is discuss the importance of healthy nutrition and carbohydrates, review different types of carbohydrates, looking at simple versus complex carbs. And then we're going to look at tips to choose healthier options at both breakfast and lunch at school. And we will discuss high protein and high fiber rich snack ideas, and then learn the effects of protein and fat on blood glucose. So to start out, I just want to start by saying, talk about a little about the importance of nutrition with diabetes. And whenever I'm teaching a new family, I think it's so important that they know this can be the whole family making these nutrition changes, and the person with diabetes doesn't have to feel alone and that they have to be on some special diet. Really what we teach in the clinic is healthy eating that everybody can follow. And so they shouldn't have to feel different or that they have to follow a special diet. And my favorite way of showing the visual is typically a picture of this My Plate, similar to the photo here. And you can see there's really a balance of macronutrients, right? So we have our carbohydrates, trying to include lots of complex carbohydrates. We have our lean protein, chicken shown here, and then we have half of the plate as non-starchy vegetables. And that is a really important piece that I'm always trying to encourage kids to include, because that's going to increase their nutrient intake and also their fiber intake, which we know is really important in helping with blood glucose management as well. And then you can see there's some fruit on the side and water. They also, milk is also a great option. But one thing I always like to encourage families is to save the sweetened beverages for treating low blood sugar, because they increase the blood sugar so quickly. And just being a simple carb, we know it's hard to match our insulin with that. So saving that to treat lows and not making that a habit in their everyday lives. Now, we know nutrition is really important for diabetes because it can help maintain blood glucose levels within our target range, reduce risk or delay diabetes complications, definitely promote optimal learning, and help maintain a healthy weight. And you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Kate. Now, carbohydrates often get a bad reputation with diabetes. And I just want to point out the importance of carbs, because they truly are so important, especially for growing children. And if we take a carb, whether that's an apple, a cookie, pasta, the body is going to break down those carbs into glucose. And glucose is the body's preferred energy source, specifically the preferred source for our brain and muscles. And when we think about the kids sitting in school and using their brains all day, or our kids that are maybe, in PE class or doing more athletics after school, so important that they're getting those carbs in. And I will dive into the needs of carbohydrates on the next slide, but they're definitely going to vary person to person. But there's been many studies that have shown just some risks of low carbohydrate intake, specifically in children. And I've listed some of them here. Risk for DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis, because there's not going to be as many carbs. They're not going to be taking in as much insulin, and the body might start breaking down fat for fuel, or even breaking down muscle for fuel. So that's a big risk of the low carbohydrate intake. Dyslipidemia is another one. So cholesterol, planol, and triglycerides, things like that. Inappropriate calorie intake, low energy and fatigue. We know definitely those carbohydrates being our energy source. And then adverse effects on growth, pubertal development, and just poor adherence to diet overall. We know kids, especially with the choices at school, they're going to serve sandwiches and pizza, and it's really hard to not have carbs in our day-to-day life. And also thinking about that relationship with food and just wanting to have that balance for kids. If we are trying to restrict or take away a whole macronutrient, that can be very hard, but that also can tie into just creating maybe not so good balance with food and that relationship with food. So here, this shows just a overall goals or guidelines for carbohydrate intake. You can see gender, it's going to vary on gender. And then the older the kids are, the more carbohydrates they're going to need. And of course, this will also vary on activity level and food preferences, of course, and food culture. So definitely taking that individualized approach to their nutrition. But these are just guidelines to keep in mind with some of the kids that you might be working with on your day-to-day. So if we look at carbohydrates, there's some different types of carbohydrates, and these all have a place in our diet. Simple carbohydrates are going to be also known as sugars, and these are going to quickly raise the blood glucose because they're naturally low in fiber. So the body's going to break those carbs down rather quickly. And some examples of a simple carbohydrate would include juice or milk. And then we have our complex carbohydrate. These are also known as starches. And these take a little bit more work for the body to break down because they are higher in fiber. So they won't increase the blood glucose as quickly as a simple carbohydrate. These include things like fruit, pasta, lentils, potatoes, rice, or beans. And then we have fiber. And fiber is a type of carbohydrate. The body doesn't necessarily break this down into glucose, however. And so we love fiber. The more fiber we can increase, everybody, not just people with diabetes, but we know fiber is going to slow down digestion. Therefore, that's going to slow down that blood glucose rise. And it will also increase satiety. So it can help with overeating and making us feel satisfied when we're eating. So fiber is really, really important to encourage kids to eat and everybody to eat in their day-to-day. So looking at some different types of carbohydrates, and first here, if you see, we have our juice. And if we have 4 ounces of juice, that'll be about 15 grams of carbs, 0 grams of fiber, 0 grams of protein, 0 grams of fat. And we know juice works really well to get that blood sugar up. So great for low blood sugar. And because there's not that fiber piece or protein or fat playing a role in it. But then if we have our apple, we still have the same amount of carbs, so 15 grams of carbs. But now some of those carbs are coming from fiber. So we have 4 grams of fiber, 0 grams of protein, 0 grams of fat. So this would be considered more of that complex carb. We know it's still going to raise the blood glucose, but not as quickly as the juice. And then we have our apple now with some peanut butter. And so we have 23 grams of carbs, 6 grams of fiber, 8 grams of protein, and 16 grams of fat. And if we can add in some protein and fat to those complex carbs, this is when we can really create that balance, which then we know can kind of help slow down that blood glucose rise and create this balance of satiety with the protein and the fiber, and also increase the nutrients coming into the meal as well. So thinking, how can we in our snack or in our meal maybe add protein or some healthy fats or some fiber instead of maybe eating that apple alone or drinking the juice. So I love this graph. It just kind of gives you a visual of how does the body break down different macronutrients and the effect on blood glucose. So you can see carbohydrates definitely have the biggest impact, and that it takes about 4 hours for that blood glucose to come back down into range, which does match the way our insulin works. So that's perfect. And then we have protein, and protein doesn't affect the blood glucose quite as much. You can see there's still a small amount of increase, and it takes longer for the body to break down protein. And so you can see that it's going to affect the blood glucose for about 5 hours. And protein is going to slow digestion. It's going to slow it down more than fiber, but less than fat, and up to about 5 hours after a meal. And then we have fat, which is going to last in the body even longer. So fat slows the blood glucose rise by slowing down the digestion more than fiber and more than protein. So it can slow down that digestion or still be digesting up to 8 hours later. And I think this is important to think about because we eat foods in combination, and we're not typically just eating carbohydrates or protein alone or fat alone. And so thinking about what you might see on maybe the CGM data of how is the blood glucose going to be affected by this combination. And I think a good example is pizza, because we know pizza is going to have some carbs with the crust, but it's also going to have a little bit of protein and quite a bit of fat with the cheese. So you're going to see this blood glucose rise, and you might see almost this stubborn high blood glucose that stays elevated because the body just taking longer to break down all of that food. And it makes me very, very thankful for automated insulin systems, because it can help kind of catch up with that if the body does need more insulin. But something to keep in mind if you're seeing this and you're wondering, like, I bolused and I gave the insulin, but I'm still seeing this elevated high blood sugar later. Just keep in mind you might need to give that correction in between, or the pump might do that for you too. So just thinking about how those different macronutrients affect the blood glucose. So here I've listed some high fiber, high protein snack options, maybe to have on hand if possible. I know not all parents can provide this, but something maybe to consider talking about with families. And I think that a big benefit of having these on hand is we know protein and fiber snacks, they're not going to really need any insulin if they're the lower carb snacks. So those kids on injections, that can be a nice snack in between meals. Also is not going to affect the blood glucose quite as much. And some of my favorites on this list, I would say, would be the nuts. That's easy. It doesn't have to be refrigerated. And the jerky would be some great options. Dried edamames, another fun one, and you can get different flavors of it. It's really high in fiber and protein, lower in carbohydrates. Of course, having the carbohydrate snacks on hand is still going to be important, but something just to consider having these snacks as well. So to dive into some tips for school nutrition, again, this is going to be for all kids. So it's not going to be just for those kids with diabetes. This can really go for everybody that's having lunch at school or breakfast at school. And looking first at breakfast, encouraging eating protein first is a great way to get some protein and help kind of build that satiety, but also slow down the blood glucose rise. And I've listed some protein options here that the school may be able to offer, or it might be something we have to advocate for or try to advocate for. And I know this can be really hard, and every school is so unique, but I did have a special story. A dad came in and he said, I was just really over all the sugary options at breakfast. And he went in and talked to the school cafeteria, and they made some impactful changes, and they started serving more protein options and kind of swapped some of those sugary things that they were serving. And so that was just really inspiring to me that he alone made that difference. So having parents advocate, having, you guys as school nurses advocating is really can make a difference. And so these are just ideas, things you guys can offer to them. Pre-bolusing is, sometimes difficult, I think, especially around breakfast if you're not there, or but it's something that's going to make a huge impact, especially with breakfast if you can do it. And sweetened beverages in the morning is another big one. So a lot of schools, from my understanding, serve juice in the morning. So if we can encourage white milk, they're going to have a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, instead of the juice being that simple carbohydrate. If we can teach kids to read the nutrition label and make those choices of maybe the lower sugar option when they are going through the line, and helping them learn maybe what would be a better option. And then educating school cooks on lower sugar options. Like, could we serve lower sugar cereal such as Kix or plain Cheerios, or unsweetened oatmeal instead of the sweetened oatmeal, or plain Greek yogurt, maybe instead of added sugar yogurt, nut-based granola bars, or even cottage cheese. And then for lunch, I don't know how many schools have a salad bar available, so something I'd love to dive into during the discussion, but really encouraging kids to utilize the salad bar, getting those non-starchy veggies in, and getting that protein in first definitely will make a big impact on their blood glucose levels and their satiety, and just increasing their fiber overall. If they're having a sandwich, or maybe there's a sandwich bar, choosing the whole wheat bread and adding veggies to their sandwich. And then again, educating on sweetened beverages. Can they choose the white milk instead of the chocolate milk, which is going to have some of that added sugar in there? So I think it's really important to keep in mind that people with diabetes think about food a lot, and they make just so many decisions about what to eat and when to eat or how to eat it. And so it's really important to just be mindful with when we're educating kids on nutrition, and really framing food in a positive light. And that can be avoid labeling food as good or bad, keeping food neutral, giving kids choices that can give them some autonomy over what they can eat. Shame can definitely lead to missed insulin or sneaking food. This can be common if kids don't want to have an injection, or want to have a treat, but they're scared to ask for it. So really just being open and having that as an option, but still educating on maybe the healthy options. Teaching mindful eating, listening to hunger cues is another important thing. But being really sensitive to diabetes, to stress and diabetes burden, because this doesn't just happen for the kid with diabetes, but it also can happen to parents and caregivers. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that the prevalence of eating disorders, people with type 1 are twice as likely to develop an eating disorder, and that's known as diabulimia. So just being really, really gentle with how we teach kids about nutrition, and really just teaching them about that balance, and that the balance of the carbs and the protein and the healthy fats, and just framing food in that positive light for them.